Good afternoon, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. This is episode 104, and we're joined by a repeat guest. This will be the third appearance of Brittany Jones. And if you all don't know who she was previously on episode 26 and 52, and now she's on episode 104. She is running for president of the United States as an unaffiliated out of the state of Oregon. We had some great conversation in those previous episodes, 26 and 52. I urge my audience to go back and watch those episodes. We're going to discuss Brittany Jones's campaign. Um, we have a lot to catch up on. The 100-day plan, a lot of the policies under the Jones administration, Secular Governance Protection Act, land back, homelessness, lots of different issues confronted within the Brittany Jones campaign. But we just want to say from here at Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum to you, welcome to the show and thanks for coming back on.
Thank you for having me every single time. It's almost like you guys are getting to see me grow as a candidate throughout this with how many times I've been on here.
That's perfect. No, I think I want to really give effort into third party, into the movement, anything outside of the duopoly. Like we really have to be serious about this more than ever. And people ask me, Kiko, will you interview people who aren't third party candidates or outside of the Democrat and Republican? I do send invitations to people. I can't control them accepting the invitation or not. People have their own reasons. I'm not going to out too many people on this particular show, but there have been some pretty prominent voices that have decided for whatever reason to not acknowledge our existence, to not come on. And I've been surprised to get the great reception that I have with the people who I have reached out to that were Democrats and Republicans. So you just never know. That's all I share with it because I don't want to ruin people's reputation, anything like that. But sometimes what you see on the screen is not always what it seems. And I'll tell you that I'm transparent as possible here. On the forum, we reach out to everybody. We don't have any sort of an ideological. I have my own views, but we're an independent podcast, YouTube channel, and we don't have any interest in deciding, oh, this person, we're not going to bring them on because they're conservative, they're liberal, they're left, they're right, nothing like that. I bring on basically whoever I want to bring on and send the invitation out. It's up to the person if they want to accept or not. Um, and I'm just glad that Brittany has decided to come on for a third time to share her platform with us. And I want to give and shine light to third party advocates and also politicians and people run for public office in general. We have all types of people come on the show, activists, professors, working people. And I just want to give in as a slight ad. Thanks for everyone that contributes to Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum, monetarily or not. We have received a few donations recently that was unexpected because previous to us becoming a monetized channel, when we hit the 500 subscriber threshold, which is what it is now with other requirements. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to get over 20,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. We don't need any of your money. If you want to send money, I'm not going to say no, but it's really just spending quality time, quality ideas, expanding your mind without a dime. And remember, you can't unthink free thought. That's kind of the slogan that we have here, the unofficial slogan. So if you want to give us a subscription for free and tell your friends and family about us, that's the best thing you can do. If you want to ask a question like that, the best way for me to answer that would be subscribe for free, tell your friends and family, and really support independent media. We are an independent media channel, and we want to make it independent. Even if we get bigger and bigger and bigger, we want to make sure that we're combating the system and we're bringing on voices that are dissident voices, true dissident voices, because we can't keep doing the same thing that we're doing over and over. We have Brittany Jones, unaffiliated, and I want to kind of start with that. Um, for people who may not know who you are, why do you decide to run unaffiliated, and what are some of the difficulties and advantages, even not running as an unaffiliated candidate?
Well, I noticed that with the parties and how it's set up between red and blue right now, it's almost like they're making it out to be a Super Bowl. Everyone's Team Joe, Team or Team Biden, Team Trump, as if it's a game. And it's not. Our livelihoods are on the line. Our lives are on the line. The environment's on the line. It's not a game. It's not a joke. And, you know, Washington said that parties and politics would pretty much destroy our government. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Now, that's not verbatim. I'm not doing a direct quote, but we're seeing that today. So I truly believe that at least at the federal level, there should be no parties, because at the federal level, you're representing the entire nation, not just this party or this demographic or that demographic. You're working for the people, and that's all the people. So I think anyone running for president should be required to renounce any party affiliation and be the president of the United States and work for all the people.
Absolutely. And having said that, it brings up another idea of ballot access, because I noticed when I'm doing these interviews, I kind of treat everyone the same, whether you're running as a Green, a Libertarian, PSL, whatever, unaffiliated, independent. But there are different avenues and different mazes that each candidate has to encounter. And I know for you, the ballot access isn't as easy, even compared to a Libertarian like Mike Terramata or Chase Oliver that I've interviewed. I know it's different for an unaffiliated person. So how does your ballot access prospects look right now at the current time, and how can they become optimized throughout the process?
That is one of the downfalls of running unaffiliated. One of the challenges I'm facing is because it costs money to travel. I have to be able to stay in a location and get petition signatures, or hire people in those locations to get petition signatures. I have to be able to get electors and make sure those electors can make it to their state capital for the, I think it's December 16th, 2024, when the Electoral College convenes. I have to pay filing fees. Oklahoma is $35,000 this election to get on the ballot. And when you're part of a party like Democrats or Republicans, the party typically pays the filing fees once they have their candidate that they're going to back. They pay to get the petition signatures. They pay to get you there. They pay for your travel expenses. And I'm doing this completely grassroots. I'm not backed by parties, so I don't have to follow their bylaws or their rules or their regulations. I'm not backed by any political action committees at this time, and I'm not backed by any corporations, so I'm not beholden to their whims. And it's truly grassroots. So every single donation that comes in on the campaign goes directly to travel. We have to set up an office here in Phoenix to have a campaign address for the campaign overall. And we relocated to Phoenix so that I could run simultaneously for Congress or Senate, because Phoenix, Arizona overall allows you to run for 2 federal offices if you're running for president or vice president. So it's kind of like a plan B. So once we get established here, get the address and everything like that, we're planning on going to Nevada. And that's only 4.5 hours away, get petition signatures, and get on the ballot in Nevada. A couple states, I'm already going to have to be a write-in candidate because they close ballot access early March, which to me makes no sense, because the primaries there's still states voting in the primaries. So why would you close ballot access for the general election when you don't even know which primary candidates are going to be picked? And it's just challenge after challenge. It's for somebody like myself, who is a poverty level candidate, running with donations from other poverty level people.
Mm-hmm. You said a lot there with the whole idea of ballot access, running outside of the Democratic Republican Party, which I view as one party. And I was just talking to Mike about this, how the 2-party system, whatever it is, I mean, we know that each wing of the bird needs each other for it to be able to fly in the sky. So, I mean, we really have to look at it as one unit at this point, regardless of the rhetoric that's coming out. I want to ask you a very specific question, because you emphasize a lot on your site about identity. You talk about gender, sexual identity, racial identity. You have other issues too. You have Second Amendment positions. You really have a broad spectrum of views represented on your site. And just based on our first 2 interviews that we've discussed, do you think that that's also part of the issue why third-party people can't get traction, is because people aren't, I guess, accustomed to having that diverse thought process when they talk to the two parties, because the way I see it, they see the two parties as opposites, and one party offers one thing and one party offers the other. But then you have a whole field of candidates like yourself that represent a broad spectrum of ideas that will probably be attractive to people. Is that a visibility thing where the traction isn't there with third party candidates, or is it something that's is it an ideological position where people they can't grasp the fact that this person is emphasizing what they would view as identity politics on one hand, but then they view other positions as, oh, that's pretty conservative minded, but it's also liberal minded at the same time.
Well, this might make some people mad. I actually think it's laziness. Because they come on my TikTok where I go live and they say, you only focus on indigenous issues, or your only focus is transgender issues, or you're only focusing on this. And I tell them, you obviously didn't do the actual work to go look through my website, to go look through my hot topic tab, where I address many different issues. And while I do have my main platform issues, like the separation of church and state, enforcing indigenous treaties and bringing accountability for that, and then overall just making sure that America is safe, from our schools to our prisons to our hospitals, but they don't take the time. We have this instant gratification mindset in America where we see one thing. Many people don't even wait for my videos to be done playing before they comment. And I have to remind them to watch the video all the way through, listen to listen, don't listen to respond. And that's the issue, is they're not taking the time to research. And I used to be the same way. Especially, I'd get a ballot in the mail with the full intention of researching all the candidates in the booklet, and I wouldn't do it. Yeah. And I had to train my brain to slow down, stop with the instant gratification, do your research, do your work, and learn and grow. And I think a lot of people don't like hearing you're calling your constituents lazy. I'm like, well, if that's what they're being, they're not taking the time to go do the research that I have done the work to put out there. So that's what it is, in my opinion.
And to that point, like I said in the previous episode that hasn't been published yet, I'm going to say it again to my audience. If you care about this political system the way that you say that you do, and I know I come across as a cynic at times to people, certain people, but at the same time, I'm saying to myself, how am I cynical if I'm platforming people who are running for public office? There's no way I'm a cynic if I have an interest in it. I say things, sure. Just because I say I don't have faith in the system doesn't mean that I don't care about the system. I mean, I care about politics. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing this YouTube show. But it's more so a question of the average voter who believes in this system, which is definitely not democratic. We got to stop calling it democracy. It's definitely not democracy. When you got candidates that can't even get visibility and they can't even get on, the ballot. I mean, if you pledge with the Federal Election Commission, you file, you do everything else that everyone else does. To me, that should qualify you and you should be available to everybody. But that's not the system we live under, because we have a campaign finance reform system orchestrated by the two parties from local, state, and federal levels. They basically collaborate together to keep anyone outside of their club outside of the club. I mean, they close out democracy, quote unquote. They don't include it at all. They're very exclusive. They're not inclusive, conscious people at all. And I don't think they're intended to be inclusive conscious. They're intended to keep you piped into the system, blue or red striped. And if you're not part of that stripe, they ignore you. They invisibilize you. And we do the opposite here. We try to optimize on people who understand that the blue-red machine is trying to keep everyone else, out of the public eye, which is completely wrong in my opinion. I would tell my audience to write down 10 things that mean the most to you on a sheet of paper. Just get a blank sheet of paper. You write down those 10 things. You can call them principles, bullet points, whatever you want to refer them as. And say to yourself, who that's running for office right now reflects those values the most? And I guarantee you it's probably not one of the two parties. So that should be the simple solution right there enough to be like, okay, why am I supporting these same people over and over again? Something's making you keep doing this when it's even going against your interest. You have 10 things that you mean that care the most for you, that mean the most to you, but yet none of these people represent what those things are on the sheet of paper that you just used. So that would be the philosophical and practical kind of response that I would have, and the advice that I would have for the average person out there that keeps getting led astray one way or the other each cycle. To me, it's not even a matter of, oh, this person can win, they can't win. What are your principles? And if the person isn't representing your principles, then stop supporting them. I don't think that that's a hard message to abide by, but I guess it is for some people. Because I know you witness these people all the time, um, where they say that they would support you. But what would be, I guess, in your experience running for public office, what has been the biggest talking point from people who would say, "Oh, I would vote for you, but." What is always the but that keeps them from voting for you?
The biggest but is they say we have a two-party system, and that is just false. We have multiple parties. A lot of people don't even know or didn't know that you could run unaffiliated as not part of any party. They're shocked. They're like, I didn't know you could do that, because there's no education on how our system actually works. Even political science classes pushes the two-party system, because political science majors will come in my life and tell me I don't have any chances because I'm not part of a party. But it's that very rhetoric that prevents people from voting for who they want to vote for. And people don't seem to understand that when they say you have no chance, and there's other people in the chat that are reading that, they're affecting that person's vote. Mm-hmm. They're affecting and making that person second guess if they really want to vote third party or not, which reduces the third party votes. So in essence, these people are working for the two parties for free. They're doing their legwork by spreading that information, or misinformation, I should say, that we don't have a chance when we absolutely do. They try to blame it on the Electoral College, or they say they need to keep Trump out of office because lives will be lost. But they don't realize that Biden is complicit in genocide happening on American soil and in Palestine. So either way, lives are being lost. And voting for the lesser of two evils is still voting for evil, and you're still complicit.
Mm-hmm. Something you said earlier too, there's a tendency, and maybe that this is the reason, because people ask me all the time, Kiko, your platform should be bigger than what it is, but we're still relatively new. But I was telling someone at work the other day, honestly, I'm surprised I even have an audience to begin with, because the whole point of the forum is in memory of my best friend. Like, first of all, that's the only reason why I started this platform. But the platform is meant to be reflective of different points of view, but more so than that, it's been a rehabilitation tool for myself, because it's supposed to be a way to how we are supposed to interact with people, converse with people. We don't argue on this show. I can honestly say, out of the 104 episodes that I've had, I wouldn't say that anything that we've had on here has been an argument, because it's not meant to be argumentative. It's meant to be conversational, and is meant to not pass judgment. But it's also testing my previous views that I held, and I think you alluded to it earlier, where we see one thing that we disagree with, and we zone out, we tune it out. We want to do the opposite here. We want you to play the whole episode through and reconsider everything that's been said, even if you disagree with it. You're not going to agree with everything that's said, but that's not the point. It's to be better at listening to all points of view and listening to someone through the entirety of the conversation, and not just be reactive to everything, because it's easy to react to anything. It's so easy to react to something, but it's harder to process what someone's saying, because that process of thought is coming from something, and is not valueless. There is value to that person's thought, but we have to find a way to understand, okay, even if I don't agree with it, I can respect it, because they're coming from a point of view that is, maybe it's personal, maybe it's ideological, whatever it is, but it's well-meaning. And we have to find a way, if you want to convince someone that that's not the right view, or at least give them an alternative, then you can't completely shoot down their idea. You have to listen to them first. You can't say, no, 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 you're wrong. You have to let them talk, and then you can, respond accordingly. It's just simple rapport to me, but that's a big problem in our political discourse, I think, in the country. And I think that's what you were referring to earlier.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you, like me and you, we've had a couple things that we disagreed on, but it was like you said, a conversation, not a debate, not an argument. And there's been other podcasts that I've been on where their tone of voice or how they asked the question was combative, but I didn't let it get to that level. I just answered the question, maybe called them out on some things that they were doing, but I did it respectfully and with facts and not emotional. Like I use logic, not emotion. And that does tend to help a conversation stay a conversation rather than an argument. And by the end of those interviews, they were surprised that they're like, there were some things that we disagreed on, but overall, I'm surprised at how much we agreed on and could work together on. And that's always, even I could be sitting down talking to a MAGA Trump supporter and having a conversation, maybe over a beer at a bar. And we may not agree with everything, but then something clicks and they're like, you know what, I don't agree with you on this, but I could absolutely work with you on this. And the conversation completely shifts its tone. And that's what we need to be doing.
Yes, no doubt. I think if people viewed, and I think independent people, unaffiliated, and people outside of the duopoly understand this a little bit more. But I can honestly say, even with some of the people I've interviewed, I don't know if they're completely open to, maybe other possibilities, because I'd like to think that everyone's a free agent of change, possibly. Whoever, regardless of what camp you're in, ideologically, working people are working people at the end of the day. And people that I work with, they have these absolutely intense, crazy views, in my opinion. And I'm just like, oh, guys, like, how do you even engage that? But at the same time, it's like, you have to understand that people are coming in with so much baggage. They're learning things from home. They're learning things in the school system, just whatever it is. I don't know if they're actually getting this through experience with different types of experiences. Experience with different types of experiences. I think that's what we need. But instead of that, a lot of people, I don't know if they're actually changing or not. Age is a number, but you have to think, how much have you changed from a point in your life you can refer to that really, tested your mind, shook your world up. Can you honestly say that you've changed from that point? Or have you even had that moment in your life yet? Or moments? I think that's the thing that keeps people from maybe engaging with, other people that they view as like not as educated. They view them as not as open-minded. I really believe that people are open-minded, but it's just a matter, it has to do with the way you engage people more so than anything. But if you follow the political discourse of today, you think that you can only engage one way, and if someone doesn't agree with your way, then that's not the right way.
It's effectively taking away our freedom of choice from through putting up those barriers in our minds. And we have to be educated and work past that. And I have had that moment actually. I used to be an all lives matter person. And I had a moment where I was just sitting there and it was actually a simple illustration that made me stop and be like, huh. It was the illustration where one person's house is on fire and the other's isn't. And the neighbor asked if they could use the hose to put out their fire. And the neighbor said, well, what if my house catches fire? I need my hose. I'm like, that makes sense. And then I had to sit back, admit I was wrong, which is what a lot of people don't want to do. And then I had to be quiet, listen, and learn. Because that's how you learn, is you listen, you take in the information, then you go do your research, then you ask questions, and then you take in more information, and then you go out and actually start doing the work once you have the information you need and adjust your mindset. And it's not easy admitting you're wrong. Nobody wants to.
Going to that point, even from when you declared your presidency this cycle, is this the first time you've declared presidency for in general? Is this the first time?
Yes, I was waiting till I was old enough. In 2016, when Trump won, I was like, I'm running. As soon as I'm old enough, I'm running. And the cutoff for this is you have to be 35 at the time of taking office. And I turned 35 in August. So I timed it perfectly to be 35 at the time of the elections. And so this is my first time running for president. I did run for mayor before in Eugene, and I'm kind of kicking myself for dropping out, but the immigration lawyer that me and my wife had said that she would stop representing us if I ran for office. So that's another barrier. People don't like when their favorites are challenged. And I'm kicking myself because the same mayor that we had that nobody liked was the only one on the ballot. So I know that if my name had been on there, I probably would have won and we could have got a different lawyer. You know what I mean? So learning that and just taking that lesson to this campaign, I did have a moment where I almost gave up, where I almost dropped out because I'm looking for a new running mate. And when my running mate stepped back, that was like oh crap, what do I do? Because ballot access is here right now and I need a running mate for that. But I'm pushing forward. I made a promise not to give up and I'm not going to. I'm going to keep fighting.
Yes, and we appreciate the transparency about what a person goes through in this campaign. I was going to bring on John Stasevich. He previously was running as president of the United States as an independent, but he dropped out, and a lot of people were bummed about it in my audience because they really had taken a liking to John. But hopefully down the road after this cycle is over, I can bring John back on, and maybe we can go back to that moment to where he dropped out and why he dropped out. I've reached out to him since, and we still keep in touch, but for reasons that I won't mention, he's not back on the show to discuss this information. But maybe at a later time we can talk about kind of get behind the difficulties of campaign running as an independent, unaffiliated, after the fact. But you're still in the race, so I did want to say something about you had 3 bullet points on Ballotpedia. You talked about priorities being term, age limits, human rights. We talked about gender, sexual identity, race, enforcing separation of church and state. The first one, term and age limits, I've interviewed 4 people in their 30s running for president, which I think is interesting. Chase Oliver is in his 30s. Jasmine Sherman's in their 30s. Gavin Bonnie's in their 30s, and you're in your 30s as well. So I think that's interesting. I didn't plan on doing that on purpose either when I reached out to everyone for these interviews. It was simply based on if a person had a viable website with the domain and just, ideas that were, wide ranging. And that's why I was attracted to your particular website in the first place. And I was like, wow, this person has really put in some work, to run for public office. And so I reached out to you, and I'm glad I did, and to everyone else I've reached out to. But what can you do possibly about that to term age limits? Because we recognize that's a serious problem. Can you executive order that? Like, how does that work?
Unfortunately, that's not something I can executive order. Executive orders are not to create new legislation or limits. That is something that Congress would have to do. And I regularly say I'm not making promises for things that I can't do, but I say what I support. And while there are things that I have a solid plan of action to do that the president can do unilaterally without Congress, at the same time, while those things are being done, because I have a team pretty much to do the legwork whenever I can't. So I actually do plan on approaching Congress about certain issues. I have a list of legislation on my website that I would love to see become federal law. And this is just one of those things. However, you have to vote in people into Congress who also agree with term and age limits. I think retirement age, 65, should be the limit. I think that Congress should have term limits and the Supreme Court. And if they don't want them, then they should remove it from the presidency as well, which is a controversial stance. But it goes to show like they need to have equal powers. And if the president is always being switched out, they don't get equal powers.
Okay, the office of president does have term limits, right?
Yes, for president, you can only serve 4-year terms and you can only serve 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So 8 years total.
but there has been exceptions to that, correct? With FDR for sure was an exception.
That was before that rule was put in place.
Okay.
Congress actually created that rule because he was such a popular president that they were afraid like a monarchy or something like that would happen. And if we have the wrong person in office, if that were to happen, then you could see America go in a very bad way. But we already are with the term limits because there have been good presidents that could have done a lot more work if they had more than 8 years, but they were limited. And I put quotations because all of them are corporate sellouts. So
That's funny. S.L. Campton has been a consistent. He's a geopolitical analyst based out of Bangalore, India. He's been on like 5, 6 times maybe. I use SL a lot for geopolitical issues and a plethora of people to come onto the show to discuss specifically things happening outside the country, within the United States, but a global perspective more or less. We talked about a lot dealing with this system here, this U.S. system, and the whole idea of a dictator is used a lot from U.S. politicians towards other systems. For instance, and I have a different view about this. Just like, for instance, people would say that Putin is a dictator, which I agree that technically he's a dictator. But what's to say that our system here isn't a dictatorship either? Um, isn't the whole idea of Congress not having term limits, isn't that effectively the same as a dictatorship? Because we emphasize the president. Yeah, the president has term limits, but Congress doesn't. So is it really what people are presenting, with the president, having limitations? But the Congress seems to have free reign, and the Congress right now sits at 14% popularity, but yet we see the same figureheads in office over and over. And how are they getting voted in if they're so unpopular? So is it really a dictate? Do you see that as a dictatorship in a way? Because we always accuse other countries of having dictators, whether it's Xi, Putin, or any of the ones in history, Castro, anybody else. But we don't seem to apply that to ourselves.
I'm glad you asked that because as you were speaking before you brought up Congress, I was like, Congress is kind of a dictatorship. Congress, I've spoken on my lives about this. Congress, I believe, has too much power. They're the only section that can impeach an elected official. The Supreme Court could legally remove a Congress member, but they've never tried it. So it's never been tested. There's no true checks and balances towards Congress except for Congress. And that's an issue. They also control the finances of this country, and all the blame gets put on the president. And that's why I think these same people keep getting elected, because people think the president is the one who controls gas prices or the cost of living or free college, free education, free healthcare. But that's not. The president's job is foreign relations and running this country and enforcing the legislation that's already passed. It's Congress who could federally raise minimum wage. It's Congress who can create free healthcare and free college. It's Congress who can put limitations on how much corporations are charging for gas. And all of these issues are put on the president's shoulders when the president has no power over that. As president, I would be able to write a bill, like my legislation that's on my website, hand it to a Congress member and ask them to submit it to the floor. That Congress member has the choice to just shred it, put it on their desk. They don't have to introduce it. They don't have to do anything the president says because they're separate but equal branches of government. Except for Congress is no longer equal. Congress has gained a lot of power.
So under a Jones administration, or just maybe just hypothetically, if you're speaking about Congress, since we're talking about that now, to me, I guess my question for you, what is the purpose of the Senate, and would you be in favor of abolishing the Senate?
I think the Senate is supposed to be like a checks and balance to Congress because legislation goes from one to the other, and it can be from Senate to the House floor too. So it can be from the backwards way, but it has to be approved by both before it makes it to the president. That seems a little redundant, but sometimes it has saved some issues, like when Trump was president, or any president, pretty much, when there's like a Democratic Senate and a Republican House, and the Republicans are passing a insane bill, and then it gets to the Democratic Senate and they say no. So it has came in handy before it got to a president that would have signed it into law. But I think personally that legislation should all be done through ballot access, especially federal legislation that affects everybody. The people should get to vote on that legislation for the people.
Yes, it's more or less and I appreciate you answering that question. It's more just an ideological angle because me personally, I don't really see the purpose of the Senate, I guess, at this point. Because if we're trying to deal with issues that are affecting the people, to me, the Senate is just another block in this. Just the whole idea about the filibuster is crazy. It's like, when is the Senate actually going to do something? It seems like the Senate is there to keep things from advancing as opposed to advancing things, because the House is writing the bills and the House is supposed to represent the people, right? That's why you have the representatives within the districts. And I know that those districts aren't, they're gerrymandered to hell and back. Most of them are. But again, the gerrymandering is a part of what? The system, right? That's a part of this, the same people who are causing the invisibility of the people. They are causing the chaos within the thought process of the people who are participating in it to vote these people in. So the corporate still goes back to the same source, even with the gerrymandering or whatever. We know who's creating those rules. You have one side trying to keep the other out, but why is it just reduced to two people each time? That's why we have to have more representation. We shouldn't even be in a situation where we have certain districts are affiliated with one party versus the other one. If you live in a true system, to me, you're just voting people in. It has nothing to do with your party. But like you said, I don't think the founding fathers wanted it to be this way, to where there are political parties with all the influence. Like, it's supposed to be simply you're voting for a person, not a corporation or for a party. But I don't know if that was just a mini rant or what. But do you have any response, or do you have any comment yourself?
I
Well,
think it was because you said we need more more representation for
mm-hmm,
the people. I was going to bridge that into the Supreme Court and say that we also need to expand the Supreme Court to be more diverse, to represent the people, because our population has grown. We've become more diverse. You know, the boomers are dying out. Our needs are different than their needs were. We need to get people in the Supreme Court who understand what it's like to live today as well as in Congress.
mm-hmm. So, and what would that number be for you? What would be the number of Supreme Court justices, presumably? This is what we're talking about. You have 9 now. How many would you expand it to?
You know, I have no idea. People were throwing out 15, and you know, it's something I feel like I would need to create a team to put together statistics to logically figure out how many we would need to accurately represent the different sections of America, because we are sectioned right now, which really sucks. We're not cohesive. We don't have unity. And you would think with the common enemy of corporate backed politicians that we could all come together. But they are very skilled at divisive tactics, and they are well versed in keeping us divided so we don't stand up against them.
To me, it wouldn't be a question of the number of justices, because at the end of the day, it's the same issue. If ideally we had 5 parties in the country, 5 strong political parties, would that even be a question? Will we even be talking about more ideological diversity within the Supreme Court justices if we had 5 viable political parties and other ones minor parties? I think the issue is that we have a grip with this blue red system that we're under. And so automatically you're probably going to have 6-3, 5-4. You may have a swing judge here and there. And I think that's the problem that we have. I think it's symptomatic of the system itself and maybe, the lack of representation.
I can agree with that. There's other countries that have multiple parties, and they don't have two parties that hold all the power. And if we are going to keep a party system, I think it should just go away. We shouldn't have parties at all. That's ridiculous to me. But if we are going to keep a party, then we need to open up the playing field and even it out.
Yes, that's the biggest hurdle I think going forward. I just I'm trying to put my finger on this whole idea of just the 1992 presidential election, which was at least in my lifetime and my memory. I have some remembrance of that. I know my dad mentions it a lot. I don't know if he was a Perot supporter, but I know that he definitely seemed more sympathetic towards the Perot campaign than he did the Clinton or the Bush campaign, whoever was running at the time. Um, and he basically, it was 18.9%. That was a large percentage for an independent, a third party candidate to garner that much support nationally. And I'm just wondering, why can we haven't came even close to that number now? We're talking over 30 years ago, and a candidate almost had 20% national support, but a third party candidate can't get even close to 10% now. And I'm wondering what happened. Like, why such a drastic drop off?
Well, we can't forget about Grover Cleveland either. He was a third party and he was elected with bipartisan support from the two major parties. And he was one of the only third parties that have been elected with bipartisan support. And he did serve 2 terms, I believe, but they weren't consecutive. I think there was somebody else that served between him. What the issue is now is the corporations have become monopolies. They bought the media stations, local and national. They own the big supply chains. They're buying out the mom and pop stores. So they are literally controlling the narrative. It's almost like North Korea. You know how they put the images of the fruit in their grocery stores and stuff. People don't want to admit that though, because they think North Korea is so bad. It's bad here. They are controlling the narrative. They're controlling the information they want us to hear. And that's one of the reasons why I believe they want to ban TikTok, is because we have free access to information on TikTok. And that's why they're trying so hard. I have millions of views on TikTok. I have over all my political platforms, I have over 200,000 followers, but TikTok is the largest. Mm-hmm. So it opens the door for competition. It opens the door for information that they don't want to get out. And it breaks through that brainwashing that's been happening since we've got television and internet and all these things that have grown so fast in my lifetime. Because I had dial-up internet when I was a kid. You had the commercials on TV and that's what you had between shows. And now ads are on YouTube, they're on the radio, they're on the TV, they're on your streaming services, and they're at the gas station, sitting at the gas station at the pump. There's videos with ads playing, and they're all owned by the same corporations. And that's why the news stations won't have me on. They're owned by the corporations that back the two-party system. And the only reason why RFK is getting news is because he started out as a Democrat and he has money. He didn't switch to independent until later. So he already had a foot in the door.
And he also had the name recognition for sure.
Yeah.
And people, they associate these characters with the names, and the names have some kind of a nostalgic value and purpose. But you said a lot there, and I agree that I don't get into like the system. Like as far as North Korea, I don't know anything about North Korea. I've never been to North Korea. I don't think I know anyone from North Korea. I know Korean people, but I think they're all from South Korea. But I guess the point I'm making is that whether it's China, North Korea, Cuba, France, I don't care where it is. It's a lack of acknowledgement of the flaws that we have in the system here, because there's clearly something wrong here, because with the 1996 Telecommunications Act, it speaks to what you're saying about the consolidation of these news corporations Disney basically, Disney has this huge catalog, but Disney owns what, ABC, like Disney, um, all these companies are like the same: ESPN, ABC, Disney, and then Amazon is the Washington Post. It's crazy. You can basically tie each company together, and each one of those chains are part of this small network. Honestly, it's a small network of companies that pretty much control all the information, whether it's music, art, free speech. There's no room for dissent outside of those companies or corporations. So if Disney disagrees with it, it's more than likely that Disney, even if they allow your opinion to get aired, it's probably going to be washed out very soon because they have mechanisms in place to filter out those opinions. And that to me is probably the hardest thing to sell to the people here. The people don't realize that they're being propagandized here. They don't believe it. They always use other countries as examples, but how's that not a form of brainwashing when you basically have all the corporations telling you what to think with the TikTok stuff coming up? Why is that coming up now? Is my question. Like this is it's weird the timing of this. Um, there has to be a reason for that, though, right?
I believe that they know that the people are waking up. We're tired of how much we're paid. We're tired of working to break our bodies to barely survive. So I've studied history quite extensively in college, and America is following the path that other nations have before they collapse. That we study their ruins with archaeologists and anthropologists, and the wealth gap gets larger. The people at the bottom get pissed off, pardon my language, and they either leave to find greener pastures or they revolt. Or a third party comes in when they're so divided and it takes over, which is colonization has done that multiple times. And we need to stop that divide. I honestly can see the corporations, because war is profitable if you already have money, and the corporations are rich. The politicians are rich. If they see our system going on this pattern, that they have to see it. They have advisors, they have educated people on their teams, and they're using that. And I do believe that with how they want to reform the government, especially with Project 2025, a collapse would be in their best interest, because then they have the money, they have the resources to come in here and create a system that they want to create, while we are so divided that we can't stand up against it. So I think that's what the push is.
How much effectiveness do you think a president has? Because I think you referred to this before, and a couple of other candidates have referred to it as a bully pit, I guess, or like a pulpit where you can kind of advocate to Congress, like you kind of give your words to like the House and to the Senate, and kind of let them like take in what you're saying to them. I don't know if that would be the equivalent of the State of a Union of the State of the Union, but how would you use the presidency if you were elected as a way to convince Congress of what you want or whatever, like without the danger of them drowning you out completely, noticing that the people would be supporting you at that point, like you would have a mandate, but how would you use it as kind of an advocacy platform, I guess, like your presidency?
Well, I would find it hard to believe that every single member of Congress would be against me going into office. There are people in there who did choose a party just so they could get elected, that do have more middle ground ideas. And I would have to find those people, and hopefully more are elected in 2024 and 2028. So I have people I can work with. And those are the people that I would approach to introduce legislation, or they could approach their peers and say, hey, here's the idea. I don't even care if they pass it off as their idea and not mine, because the plan or the job is to get the job done. And if that says, hey, I have an idea, you could pass it off as yours, here it is. Like, I don't need the credit. I just want people to be safe and taken care of.
how do we combat the idea of because a lot of the stuff we talk about is national. The problem that I see though is if I'm a PSL member, for instance, if I'm a libertarian, maybe there's more assets because I know that the Libertarian Party of Tennessee is growing. But if I'm a member of another political party, even though I know we talked, it kind of goes against what we were saying earlier. But if you are part of a minor party, a lot of times you don't even have local offices. There's no local PSL office or Green Party office. So how do we grow those structures at the local level or people who are independents? Like, how do we grow or recognize people like that who are running for public office when they're going against the visibility block that we've talked about before? How do we grow from local to national?
Well, there are actually a couple of organizations out there that do specifically work with independent parties. Good Party, it's not a political party. They specifically work with unaffiliated independent candidates. Run for Something works with independent and I believe third party. They're all at the state level, but the organizational structure is really sound. They have helped independents get into office. And I keep bugging them like, hey, especially Good Party, I'm like, when are you going to move to the federal level? Because they don't have anything in place to help with the presidential election, but they have stuff for state level elections. And so they are willing to help independent candidates get out there, get their name out there. Their followings are also growing on TikTok and other social media. And I like how they work. They're creating free tools for candidates to use. I'm actually planning on trying to work with them here in Arizona for my simultaneous run for Congress or Senate. I really don't know which one I'm going to run for yet. I'm thinking Congress, but we don't have a location here yet to know what district I would be in. So it just depends. But yeah, we definitely have those organizations to work with, and we need more organizations like that.
As far as the TikTok issue again, so if you were president, what would be your reaction to this going on right now? And do you view this as a fight against free speech, or is this something else?
I would definitely not sign it into law, but Congress would most likely pass it anyways because after the president vetoes a bill, they can do a super majority vote or what I forget exactly what it's called and get it into legislation anyways. At that point, the president would have to challenge it in the Supreme Court, and the justices would have to decide if it's a violation of free speech. I do think it is a violation of free speech to take that away. A lot of it's a violation of the free market because a lot of small businesses have been able to grow on TikTok. And taking that away, you're literally going to be destroying small businesses and people's outlet for their creativity. So as much as they're touting freedom, they're not. Neither party is for true freedom. They want to control the narrative, which is why they want to get rid of TikTok.
And so this is a pretty much a bipartisan effort right now. Like, how did this even come up? I haven't followed it a lot. That's why I'm asking you. You may know more about it because I know you use TikTok a lot. Um, I mean, it's pretty much like your main portal for visibility.
Well, money. They were bought out. Every single person that voted yes had a contribution from, I think it's AIPAC, APAC.
Oh, APAC. Oh gosh. Oh wow. Surprise. What a
APA.
surprise.
Is it AIPAC or is it
It's
APAC?
APAC. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
AIPAC. Yeah. American Israeli Public Affairs Committee.
they gave contributions to Congress members and it money. Their sellouts. Our elected officials are sellouts to corporations and the wealthy CEOs that want certain things to go a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Even I'm going to name drop here because I'm very disappointed in Jeff Jackson. He seemed to be very transparent. He seemed to be on the ball with sharing what's going on in the House floor. And he voted yes on the TikTok ban, even though he used it to get elected.
Mm-hmm.
So he pretty much elevated his career, then shut the door behind him.
The whole idea, we talked about this before. it goes into your separation of church and state. And that would be, to me, that would be the strongest argument for the separation of church and state. Um, will be lobbies like APAC, which is a huge, huge lobby in DC. We've talked about this before. Just go to Open Secrets. Go to Google, type in Open Secrets, and it tells you the corporation and how much money they give to each of your favorite politicians. And like I said, I don't have any horse in this race. So when people come up to me and they talk a certain way, like Kiko, who's your favorite politician? I don't have any. Um, you just but go in there and just look at the money line, and look at who's lining their pockets up from these different lobby groups. These corporations are in lockstep with the government officials that you're electing in office. And this is the scary part about the whole situation is they're using that to say, oh my gosh, like you're anti-Semitic because you're critical of APAC. I'm like, it has nothing to do with being anti-Semitic. It's ridiculous. It has to do with corporations dictating their views. It's a breach of separation of church and state because technically APAC is a religious lobby. That's the way they define it. So it's a breach of separation of church and state is what it is. I mean, that's the way I would approach that. It has nothing to do with a religion. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff against religion. I'm not against religion. But at the same time, we have a right to not practice religion too. It's not just practicing religion. We don't have we don't have to be involved in that either. I mean, that works both ways. But it seems like people have gotten away from, I guess, whatever constitutional knowledge that they thought that they had or what. But I just the smear campaign is real, and the TikTok ban is definitely deeper than what it seems on the surface.
I absolutely agree. And with separation of church and state, a lot of people don't stop to think that they say it's for the government not to control the churches. But there's actually two clauses in the Constitution in the freedom of exercise. I need to look up the names again, but there's two clauses in the Constitution. And it's the one that says we have the freedom to practice our religion, but we don't have the freedom to force it on others. And that's exactly what these religious lobbying organizations are doing. They're using their religious ideology to pass legislation that forces us to follow their religion. Even though we don't follow it mentally, they're making us follow it physically, like overturning Roe v. Wade. They're forcing people to not be able to get an abortion because it's against their religion. Mm-hmm. That is forcing somebody to follow your religion, which is a violation of the Constitution, and people don't see it that way.
And to that point, even the whole idea, and I tried to debunk this stuff with friends. I mean, first of all, I knew that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned because like the writing was on the wall, if you ask me. Like that whole summer was just that was the talk of the town. It's like what was going to happen. But that was a collaborative effort. And whether people believed or not, those same Democrats who you double down on to protect Roe v. Wade were paid off by those same corporations, religious lobbies. All you have to do is go on Open Secrets, and it tells you why people allow things to happen. I don't care what excuses people want to make. You can blame the conservatives or whatever. All I'm saying is that it took both groups to allow that to happen. If the Democrats really want to protect abortion, they could have done it. It's clear that they did not want to either prioritize it or they didn't want to protect it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. They simply allowed it to happen. And so I guess right now it's at the state level, but it's just one of those things where you have to understand just what's going on before you make these comments and stuff, because it's not like it's like, oh my gosh, those innocent Democrats. If you agree with the right to have an abortion, you can't just be like, oh my gosh, yeah, they defeated us or whatever. What do you mean? Don't you have more Democrats in office than you do Republicans? And you mean to tell me we're going to let them get a pass for allowing that to happen?
Right? They are paid off, and that's a lot of people are like, I'm going to vote Democrat because I'm safe if I vote Democrat. And I'm like, so you're safe, but we're not safe. Native people aren't safe. They're like, we need to vote Democrat, we need to vote blue because our rights are going to be taken away. And I say, do you not see that your rights are being taken away with blue in office right now? It's already happening. So why would you vote for the same thing? Because Biden absolutely has the power to make sure that we have access to reproductive health care on a federal level, because the right to life, liberty, and happiness is federal law. It's constitutional law. And he's not doing that because nobody can force us to put our life before someone else. The Supreme Court ruled on that with the police officers. They're not required to put their life on the line to help someone in need. So why force a person to put their life on the line to give birth? It's hypocritical. And especially with the United States having the highest mortality rate out of the developed nations for people who are pregnant or people dying right after birth. So we're literally putting our lives on the line to bring new lives into this world. And constitutionally, we shouldn't have to. And so the president absolutely has the power to protect that access and to protect transgender people's access to healthcare. And he's not doing it. He's letting your rights be stripped away. Democrats are no better than Republicans, and we need to actively vote against the two-party system, even if they don't vote for me. If nobody votes for them, they don't win.
Yes, that's an important point too. I don't know if it's a protest vote, whatever people call it. I just think that there needs to be a principled vote. And even if you don't support this non-duopoly candidate, I think any non-duopoly candidate is better than what we have now. Like I can say that wholeheartedly, that if I do vote this election cycle, it definitely won't be duopoly. I can't tell you the last time I voted for a duopoly candidate. Um, and it's just like I said, the people who come to me, they approach me and they say, Kiko, well, um, everyone doesn't think the same within the duopoly. That may be true. There may be voices, and I think you even alluded to it earlier, that there definitely some people that maybe have more of a middle ground that are in the two parties. But at the same time, like, what power do they actually have? They're still suffering under all the other voices. What if you do like have like two or three people in Congress that speak out against their own party? That's still not enough. I mean, that's not doing anything. I mean, right now we have Julian Assange, a political prisoner, suffering in Belmarsh prison, and you have 9 people who have signed on to this. It's just it makes me sick knowing that Congress just doesn't care about free speech. I mean, he's in prison because of free speech, because he published things that went against the government's narrative, and he's suffering for it. But we're always told First Amendment this, First Amendment that. Is it really First Amendment? It's First Amendment until that person gains too much support, and then all of a sudden that person is ostracized and they're in prison, and their family has to live through death threats. They have to live without their dad, without their spouse, or TikTok gives independent candidates too much control and too much dialogue. So we got to ban TikTok. Do you guys not see the parallels? Do you not see the connections? No one's agreeing with First Amendment. The two-party system doesn't want First Amendment. The First Amendment is under threat more than ever now, even though people are using First Amendment and it sounds cute in a speech in a State of a Union address, but they're not for free speech. I mean, didn't Biden just call the immigrants illegals or something? He, you would think that he was like any like super right winger, which he is. And it's just like the cat finally came out of the bag with Biden. And it's just, I don't understand the people that I know, especially the way that they think, how did they believe that this guy reflects their values at all, but it's because of Donald Trump. And it's so sad. It's right back to the same thing again. we're voting for someone because somebody else is maybe going to get in. I don't know how you resolve that. It's so sickening to me and sad that we don't support people. We go against people. We don't support people that we should support.
I agree, and that comes from fear. But people need to. I just actually made a video on TikTok. I was like, so you want change, but you're afraid of change. So you don't actually do anything to make the change happen. And then you complain that nothing has changed. You need to be the change if you want change, even though it's scary. That's when you be brave, because it's not going to change unless you actually take steps to change it. And so I said, either be the change or be quiet, because I'm tired of hearing hypocrites complain, quite frankly. And I'm not going to take away anyone's right to free speech, but you made your bed, lie in it. Don't complain to me about it, because I tried to tell you, don't do the same thing again. Don't do the same thing again. Make some change. It is time. The Republican Party is fracturing. The Democratic Party is fracturing. The Green Party is fractured. I mean, I can't remember a time in my adult life where a candidate won a primaries, like Biden won the primaries, but Marianne Williamson is not dropping out, even though she's a Democrat. The opposing candidates of a party typically drop out once the primaries are over if they lose them. We're not seeing that this time. So things are changing. The parties are fractured. Now is the time to get an independent candidate in there. But the people have to stop being afraid, or if they are afraid, to be brave. Step up. Don't be a hypocrite anymore. Don't be complicit. Just be the change. Fill in that bubble. Fill in the bubble.
Yes, that's a lot you said there, but it's not fair to you because you're running for office, and so we're actually going to have a whole panel of people from the People's Party of Texas coming on this weekend. Shout out to People's Party of Texas. They're technically a political party, but they're more so a grassroots organization in the state of Texas. They help with prison reform. They help with drug abuse, drug awareness, um, doing drugs safely, harm reduction. They do so much great stuff in the communities. Shout out to People's Party of Texas. But we're going to have them on, and they're going to kind of give a commentary of the field of candidates running. Um, I think they know who you are too. Like they follow the forum very carefully. And a lot people know who Brittany Jones is. That's for sure. Um, and like you said on TikTok, you said that you were even bigger than Marianne Williamson. Like when you first got on there, like she hadn't even had any kind of an infrastructure on TikTok or any presence at all. But I'll leave it to them to kind of answer that question. There's definitely something weird that's going on because Nikki Haley is technically still in too, right? So you have all these different dynamics going on, people still in the race. And the reasons I don't know. Like I'll leave it to the outsiders to comment on it because you're running for a public office actively. And I want to stick to your platform and especially talk about your 100-day plan and kind of envision and tell my audience like what would be a part of your 100-day plan under the Jones administration.
So I do need to update my 100-day plan, but as it stands now, we would be convening Senate to go over treaties and treaty violations and working on expanding the treaties and bringing accountability for those violations, because the president can call Senate to session to go over treaties and treaty violations and for new negotiations. And we'd bring the leadership of the different nations within America to that meeting because each nation is going to need something different. So that's in my 100-day plan. And then I have quite a few executive orders that I'll be implementing immediately. The right to reproductive health care. It would not be restoring Roe v. Wade. It would be providing the federal right to reproductive health care and an executive order under free speech to give the transgender population access to gender affirming care, because that's under self-expression is under freedom of speech. And I believe gender expression is a form of self-expression. And then an executive order to make sure that religious lobbies can't lobby for legislation under the separation of church and state. So that's clarifying the Constitution right there. And that's within my first 100 days. I will also be creating a task force immediately to start getting a plan together for my homeless housing plan that I have. I don't have a name for it, but it's to get people actively into homes and off the streets. And it's not giving them a home for free. There would be a mortgage, but it'd be based off their actual income, their actual expenses, and today's cost of living, today's expenses. And that's in the 100-day plan so that we could start immediately tackling the homelessness situation. And it is on the table to declare a state of emergency if needed, if our politicians are still wilding out and taking stuff from corporations and violating our rights. There is an act of genocide happening on American soil, and that qualifies for a state of emergency. It's a touchy subject because I would be willing to deploy troops on American soil for the good of the people for once. Troops have been deployed on American soil before for when the segregation ended, and the Black students needed to be protected going to school, and the riots were happening. And then during the concentration camps, for Japanese concentration internment camps, they were deployed on American soil then as well. This time, I would use the military to help with the MMIW crisis, help strengthen the border, make sure the immigrants are protected and not killed on our border, make sure the resources are there, water, shelter, all the stuff that's needed for asylum seekers, refugees, people coming in the legal way as well, which asylum seeking is a legal way to get into the country. So the military can be used to help the people under a state of emergency. I wouldn't do martial law. Don't worry about that. But we need to rip the Band-Aid off. And it needs to happen quickly to make sure that we start addressing these issues right away.
You mentioned MIW. Can you expand that for the audience that may not understand what that is? The missing indigenous people.
So MMIW is the missing and murdered indigenous women, but it expands to Two-Spirit, our men, our women, our children. They are going missing or being murdered every 30 seconds. At the beginning of last year, it was every 60 seconds. And when this happens, because reservations and treaty territory are supposed to be sovereign, the federal, like FBI or the cops, say they have no jurisdiction. But then the same cops will go onto a reservation and shoot someone who they think is an immigrant coming over the border when really they just shot a Native man, which did happen last year. And so they absolutely do obviously have some sort of jurisdiction. They do have a way to work with tribal police, tribal authorities to work for MMIW and make sure that resources are allocated to our missing and our murdered. Man camps for oil pipelines are a huge contributor to this. We see right now there's a huge push for mines and refineries in America, and they're doing this against First Nations wishes. They're standing up. There are some tribal councils that are selling out to the corporations, but the people are not. And they're starting construction on these refineries on sacred burial sites without consulting council. And it's a huge issue. And as they start building, they're going to have man camps, which is going to cause more of our people to go missing.
As far as I know, yourself and Jasmine Sherman are the only two people who have a land back policy. Can you expand on your land back policy?
Yes. My land back policy involves working with the nations to have actual sovereignty and freedom. And one of my biggest things that I plan on doing is removing the infrastructure restrictions. Tribal leadership, tribal development, they can't improve infrastructure on tribal lands without the approval of the American government. They can't build hospitals, improve their roads, schools, police stations. They can't do any of that without permission. And so removing those restrictions and then permanently removing those restrictions within treaty negotiations would bring a lot of freedom and sovereignty to First Nations. And then the president also has the power to enforce treaties, which means I could immediately halt the oil pipelines, the highways, anything that violates a treaty that crosses into First Nations territory. True sovereignty, it varies by nation. Not every single nation is going to want the same thing. And so discussing it with each nation, I'm the only candidate that actually had anything to do with land back on my website, even though it wasn't titled that in my 100-day plan. I absolutely, my steps that I'm taking with First Nations is for land back. So we have to remember that just because it wasn't titled land back doesn't mean I didn't have it on my website. And I was the only candidate for months that had a policy on their website for it. I'm the only candidate with a solid plan of action for this. As other people use it as like a talking point, they throw the words out there, like land back in an interview, without actually elaborating on what they plan to do.
Are you referring to Jasmine Sherman?
Well, I wasn't going to name drop.
Well, the reason why I say is because I just had Jasmine's vice presidential candidate on episode 102, I believe. And so that's the reason why I brought it up, is because Tanda Blueberry was specifically talking about land back, representing the Pomo Nation in California, the Kashai tribe in California. That's the reason why I asked, like, was it Jasmine that you were referring to?
Yes, and I am referring to Jasmine. This is her second Indigenous running mate, and I have a video up on my platform where Jasmine is silencing. Did I say her? I meant there. This is their second Indigenous running mate, and I actually have a video up where with proof of them silencing and lying about Indigenous people who were trying to talk to them about land back. And this issue is ongoing with them. So where I have done the work, learning about land back, going to rallies, going to marches, learning about MMIW and ICWA, and actually participating in the community, Jasmine is expecting others to do the work for them, which is why on debates, Jasmine only says land back and then moves on to other stuff without elaborating. So their running mate can absolutely talk about it because they're knowledgeable about it. But Jasmine's not doing any of the work themselves. None of the other candidates are.
Interesting. This is a new development for me. I'll put it this way: I'll stay out of it for sure. But I knew something was going on, because I know with the presidential forum, you were originally scheduled to be a part of that panel, and Jasmine definitely had a question for you. I'm not sure if it was land back related, because I never got the question, but maybe you all have discussed it, aside, from this particular forum. But you all definitely connect with each other. You guys are on the same. I think you follow each other on X, if I'm not mistaken.
Unfortunately, because of their silencing of Indigenous voices, and they'll say that I'm silencing Indigenous voices because of, the smear campaigns, but I silence any misinformation on my platform because I'm not Fox News. It doesn't matter who it's coming from. So it's not me silencing Indigenous voices and lying about talking to them. Unfortunately, a lot of them, Jasmine went out of their way to promise colonizers, I'm sorry, if you're not native, you're living here, you are colonized. You are part of the colonizers aspect. And unfortunately, Jasmine promised to let people who are not native live on native territory for free in their land back policy. And you can't make that promise for First Nations. You cannot do that.
Oh, wow.
That was in their free and equal debate. And my policy doesn't revolve around what I say I will do for Indigenous communities. My policy revolves around bringing Indigenous communities, Indigenous leadership together to see what they need and how we can work together to make that happen. And if that makes people who are not native uncomfortable to talk about land back, oh well. They're not facing the act of genocide that's happening. I'm not going to sit here and try to make other people feel comfortable about land back when it's First Nations who comes first.
And
does that make sense?
So you're saying that it's a separate thing with Jasmine's running mate Tanda, who is a part of the First Nations. You're saying that that's like a completely different situation. You're saying that Jasmine themselves doesn't actually have a land back policy.
Agreed. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Their first running mate was Indigenous as well. And they gave them a deadline to write the land back policy, like a few days to write an entire policy. And Jasmine wasn't going to do any of that work.
And what time frame are we talking about with the first person running?
I want to say around March of last year. I have to go and see because I was approached by quite a few Indigenous people actually to call Jasmine out about it. And I was like, I can't do that without proof. Like, I need evidence to show me that they actually did that. And they came through with the evidence. I have video evidence. I have text evidence of all this happening. It's TikTok on my call outs and receipts tab. And this isn't supposed to be a smear campaign, but it is politics. So I'm putting it out there that not everybody is doing the work that needs to be done. They're putting that work on others and claiming that work for themselves.
This is news to the audience. This is for sure. This is definitely jaw-dropping news, because this is the first time I'm hearing any of this, and I researched quite a bit, but like I said, this is the first time I've heard this. So I would definitely invite Jasmine back on to maybe get their version of it or their side of it. But I have invited Jasmine on recently, and that was part of the reason why Tanda came on to the show, because I had reached out to Jasmine, and Jasmine said that it would be a better option to have Tanda come on as opposed to them. And I didn't think anything of it. It was a pleasure talking to Tanda Blue Bear. That was a great conversation. But I can't question people's motives and stuff. I'm just basing it. I had originally invited Jasmine to come back on for a third time, but Jasmine instead proposed for Tanda to come on as opposed to them.
I am grateful, honestly, that an Indigenous voice. Sorry, I got a phone call. Okay. I am grateful that an Indigenous voice got pushed forward. Absolutely. I'm glad that Tanda was able to come on. But once again, that's because Jasmine doesn't actually seem to know what they're talking about when it comes to land back. And they're the ones that are going to be in office. They're the ones that are going to be working towards this, or supposed to be. So they should be able to talk about this topic. They shouldn't put it on somebody else's shoulders. They shouldn't push it off onto somebody else. They should be willing to do that work and talk about it.
Yes, this is probably the first time in the forum's history where I really don't have a response to it, because it's so new.
This is going to be kicking a nest, but it has to be said.
No, it's fine. No, that's totally fine. That's great. I know my audience will probably like it, because some people are like, oh gosh, like, it's so informational. Is that something bad about having information? Thank you very much. But no, we're not really the gossipy type of YouTube channel. But no, I just let people kind of decide for themselves. But this is the first I'm hearing of this. And
I do have proof. I do have proof on my TikTok about what happened back then. I have the video up. I have the text messages, and a smear campaign towards me, I think, is what led Tanda to Jasmine. Because
what was the smear campaign?
So I'm Indigenous as well. I'm reconnecting. I was involved as a child. I grew up in a Mexican family. Mexican is Indigenous to Turtle Island as well. People seem to forget that. And there was a smear campaign because this is drama that I decided not to participate in on TikTok. But when I'm asked about it, I will answer because I'm transparent. I did decide to pursue a relationship with a Native man. And this other person decided that they were mad that I did that and that he decided to pursue a relationship with me and not them. And so they started dropping breadcrumbs and twisting information and saying that I was lying about being Native. And because of my skin color, people had an emotional reaction. And rather than looking at my receipts, because I posted my DNA, I posted, I know my nation, I know my family, I'm Potawatomi. I've been reconnecting to my nation for almost 4 years now. And I'm not enrolled, never claimed to be enrolled. But they just used that to try to silence me, all because they were mad and jealous. But that's politics. People will go around talking bad about you and trying to discredit you, but it's not going to stop me from going out and doing the work. And that's why I blocked a lot of people on TikTok, because I'm not going to have the misinformation on my platform. Our relatives are going missing, and whether they want to argue with each other about if I'm Native or not, if I'm Native enough or not, they can do that. There's work that needs to be done, that needs to be focused on, that doesn't revolve around my heritage. My platform is not based on my heritage. My platform is based on the work that I'm doing and that I plan to do. So, yeah.
But I think, and I brought it up because I think this is the first time I've actually asked you that question, and this is the third time around. Because me personally, like I only bring it up when I feel like it's relevant. Like I couldn't care less if someone is indigenous enough or not indigenous enough or part of this group and that group. But there's definitely an emphasis on your site, like indigenous related issues. So I just assumed that you had some ancestry, obviously. Um, I wasn't sure to the extent, but I appreciate you clarifying that because I think that's the first time I've heard you mention like a nation even. But I don't think I've asked you the question either, to be fair. But yeah, there's definitely a lot going on there, and I'm still processing everything. But it's clear that there has been communication that's been back and forth between the Jones campaign and the Sherman campaigns, and you're claiming that you're the first person to basically have a land back policy. Just to be clear.
Yeah, that's what I'm claiming. I had my 100-day plan up months ago, and it wasn't titled land back, but the steps in there for First Nations absolutely have to deal with land back, true freedom, true sovereignty. And what I did was I took the talking points and everything that we've been working towards during the last year and put it in one statement so that people don't have to like go look for it in other places, or you don't have to come in my live to hear me talk about it. And what I've noticed is the more I talk about Indigenous issues, the less views I have. People don't want to hear about it. They don't want to learn about it. And, people are willing to close down the streets and businesses for Palestine. They're willing to march for BLM. I was a part of a march for the transgender rights in DC that went for blocks. When I go to rallies for natives, it's only us there. None of our allies there. I'm going to be on a rally actually on the 19th in Arizona, in Phoenix. And I have that information pinned on my TikTok right now. And it'd be great to actually see allies show up for us, because it hasn't happened. There's active genocide happening on American soil, whether I'm Native enough for anyone or not. That doesn't change the fact that active genocide is happening on American soil. I have a solid plan to fight it, and I'm out here doing the work. I'm putting my actions where my words are. And that's what should stand out. That's what should be important. Not the petty drama because an auntie got jealous. To be frank.
Wow. So again, this will be when I play this back, it's going to be like, oh gosh, that happened. And then unfortunately the technical issues happen, which it happens with the land of the internet. But hopefully we can we've talked about a lot of stuff, but the land back issue is really interesting. I thought it was distinct because like I said, your sex work, you're one of the few people that I know that have even touched on sex work and then the land back and the separation of church and state. I mean, you definitely stand apart in a lot of different ways when you talk about the field of candidates when it comes to positions. Um, and some people will use that against you, and some people will be drawn towards that. But I'm more interested in just the issues themselves. But I definitely want to get the clarity, and I'm glad that you clarified this situation. Um,
Of course, I mean, I have my receipts. I've been told that I'm lying about my military service, my marriage. I've been told that I'm a Russian sleeper spy, that there's that I was fired from Walmart for grand larceny. I've never worked at Walmart. There was claims around that I was an ex-Canadian figure skater or Canadian ex-figure skater. So for me, it's just another part of the misinformation being spread, but it hits a little close to home because of what we're fighting. Call me Russian all you want. I do have Russian genetics. I'm not obviously full native, but there's work to do.
mm-hmm.
And that hits close to home because it does affect the work that I'm doing. We shouldn't be fighting each other. We should be coming together. And the lateral violence within our communities is damaging to the work that we're trying to do.
Mm. Yes. And you say you do have connection, like you do have contact with the First Nations, like that you're a part of.
Yes. So the Potawatomi Nation, it's funny because the old historian of that nation, when I first reached out, was helping me, teaching about my family's history, about the nation's history. And then I sent him my DNA kit, and we actually ended up being cousins. And that's how I found my living family within the nation. And he was helping me. I'm supposed to go there this spring, but I also have to get ballot access, so I might have to push it off, unfortunately. But connecting to your roots is a huge part of reconnecting, going and visiting the family you find. I'm still looking for family in other nations, like my Mexican heritage. I'm actually more South American indigenous, is what in the genetics of South Amerindian, but it includes Mexico, Southern California. I'm actually almost 10% in that regard. And I have, through my DNA testing, I did find pings of relatives down in Mexico. And I need to, part of the journey is reaching out to family and learning even more. But outside of my own nation, I've worked with Paula Pena. She's the co-chair of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus of the SEIU Union. I've worked with Hannah Shooting Bear of Indigenous Now. I've helped them put on events. We're working on legislation for Oregon. I'm bringing that legislation here to Arizona for the referendum process, for MMIW, for intertribal support, for making sure that our children are protected because there's loopholes through ICWA. And we just have to work together. And I've been doing this work. I've been to ICWA rallies, MMIW prayer runs. You can't do the work without connecting, because you have to have those connections, because you have to listen to those people in those nations. Each nation needs something different.
And as far as when I go on your website, when you say the Secular Governance Preservation Act, and then you have the Corporate Tax Transparency and Accountability Act, are those exclusively things that is this something that you created? Like, are these documents yourself, or are these already acts on the books?
I created them. Ibrahim Kulubi in Oregon is willing to be the sponsor for the chief sponsor for the Land Act Freedom Use, the Land Use Freedom Act. You'd think I would know the names, but it's been it's been a day. But he's willing to do that, and that would allow people to live on their land in their trailers. Because right now in Oregon, you can only camp on your land for 2 weeks out of the year. You're not allowed to live in a trailer on your own land. And I think as long as it's clean and up to code, you shouldn't have to worry. It's your land. You should be able to live on it. Corporations should absolutely be paying taxes on what they have in tax havens. Their assets and everything that they have in overseas bank accounts they should be paying taxes on those. That alone would help ease the burden on our economy and help towards free education and free healthcare. But that's going out to the corporations, so we'll see how that goes.
In episode 52, like I almost meant to previous to the episode, I meant to clip it, but I was like, okay, that's not necessary because people can go back and watch the episodes 26 and 52. I had asked you a question about military, and we talked extensively about the military, and like you've even explained in this conversation how you would use the military, like in certain situations, and just your overall view of the military. But you definitely seem to have changed, like I wouldn't say change your view, but you've changed your approach, I guess, to the question because you just mentioned genocide in Palestine, but I asked you previously about Israel and Palestine, and you said that you didn't really focus on those types of issues. Like, did you just change based on recent occurrences, or?
I think I was more along the lines of that I needed more information, that I didn't want to speak about those topics without having that information. And with the recent events, it's very clear what is happening. Children are dying in hospitals, escape routes are being bombed, neighborhoods, refugee camps, they're being bombed. A newborn baby is not Hamas. And quite honestly, I can't blame the Palestinian people for turning to Hamas to fight back against Israel when that's all they had.
I liked also too how everything is Hamas. Like it went from you have Hamas is also a political party. And I think that they play on like the population's ignorance here. Because if you look outside of the United States, and I had my friend Ben Sadegafar on, who's lived in Israel, who's Jewish, very interesting person. I went to high school with Benny, and he's from Iran originally. And even his views, like which I think are more reflective of Israel, they're still going to conflict with a lot of the people there in Israel, like especially the Netanyahu administration. Um, and we discussed the possibility of Israel probably maybe knowing in advance that this attack would happen on October the 7th, and why that wasn't proper precaution ahead of time, knowing that there was already a tip, basically, that this was going to happen. And he said that himself. But regardless of that, it's the whole idea of Hamas, Israel, Hamas war is the way they word everything. And it's like, is it Israel and Hamas? Because it seems like to me, like the images and stuff that I'm getting, it's a lot of just like dead civilians, and like I don't see the Hamas factor. And a lot of the Hamas leadership, quote unquote, even if you take the premise that Hamas is a terrorist organization, which the United States considers Hamas a terrorist organization. And this is not me. I'm basing it on the nomenclature of what they're saying. The U.S. government views Hamas as a terrorist organization, but not most countries around the world. All you have to do is go look at these official positions. And people don't like to hear this kind of stuff, but I'm just telling you, everyone does not view Hamas as a terrorist organization. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just telling you what the nomenclature is outside of the United States, outside of the Western world. It's a different reality when people are in that part of the world, and the way we refer to things isn't going to be the same. But I think that the news media uses that as a way to basically, if you have any position that's outside of what they're saying, you must be a terrorist too, because you're not agreeing with what the official narrative of the US government is. And so we have to be really careful with this. It is a sensitive issue because we know people who are tied to the Israel lobby. I know people who are Jewish who have nothing to do with the Israel lobby. I know people who are Palestinian that have a lot to do with the situation. They were affected by the Nakba in 1948. But then I know some people who are Palestinian and they have a more free, I guess, opinion about it. They're not as tied emotionally to it. And like I said, I can't control everyone. Everyone has a different approach to it. But I'm just telling you, from my view, I can tell the propaganda is there. This is a completely disproportionate situation. There's nothing proportionate about it. Even if October 7th, even if it did happen, I'm not going to dispute. I couldn't care less about 1,000 people killed, 500 people killed. Human life is human life lost. I get that, but this is a disproportionate situation, and this did not start on October the 7th. This started a long time ago. It wasn't October the 7th. That's the thing that the media is kind of like keeping out. And it's a way to honestly, for me, justify Netanyahu staying in control. And my dad and I actually spoke about this and said that if it wasn't for this October the 7th event, which I personally believe was already pre-planned, I don't want to get too conspiratorial for some people in the audience, though, because some people may not have that knowledge and may not come in having some of the information at hand, but simply the motive was there for Netanyahu to stay in control, but he needed something to stay in power. But it's not like people here follow Israeli politics. And I don't know. I really appreciate your stance. I knew that you probably had views going into it. And I think it is a safe response. Like, that's a good response to have. I just don't have enough information because it's clear that at that point when you said that, it was a completely different context that we're in now, just in the media landscape. I mean, now the way they've blown this out of proportion, it's I can't even really comment on it. It's scary how the propaganda changes with time.
Not just the propaganda, but my, as you stated, like my first stance was I don't have enough information, so I don't really have any comments on it. Now that I have that information, my stance has changed. And people try to use that against my campaign, saying, oh, you're wishy-washy or you're lying, when really we're growing. We got more information, we can make an informed decision, and that's what we're going to do. We're not going to stick in the same mindset and not grow, because then nothing would change. Our political environment is changing rapidly. The political environment globally is changing rapidly. So to make a statement a year ago and to expect that statement not to change with those developments is ignorance. Statements are going to change. Stances are going to change as more new information comes in. And I can just stay fluid and as transparent as I can be with that growth and changing of stances.
One thing I'll say, and it's not specific to anyone in particular, but I'll say this much since we're in the conversation. It's been a great conversation, this episode 104. The Israel Palestine, this whole idea of Israel and Palestine is under an occupation. I mean, this is just a fact that at this point, I don't know how people could argue that position without tagging you as some kind of a name. I'm trying to be objective as possible, but I'm just telling you what I see. It's an occupation is what it is. I don't know what else people can call it. And for people who are like, well, Kiko, you're not strong enough because you're not calling it a genocide. First of all, it's just like, I'm telling you what I'm saying, because I'm also trying to reach out to different people so we can come to some kind of an understanding. As long as you have one group saying this and one group saying that, and they never meet eye to eye, then what's the point of even having the conversation? I'm trying to meet people who normally wouldn't be a part of this conversation to where they can at least have a foot stuck in to where if they do want to comment, they can, as opposed to them being outside of the room. Like, that's the only way we can do this. We have to all be in the same room. We can't be outside of the room, these people in, these people out. We have to be able to talk to each other some kind of way, these different ideas. And it's not me being wishy-washy. That's just the way I see it. It's an occupation at the very least. If you can't agree that it's an occupation, there's probably a conversation we can't have because you don't want to admit it's an occupation. but I call it an occupation. At the very least, that's what it is. And the question I asked you last year, it just shows that these issues are really important. That's what, to me, it proves is that these issues are really important. It means that we're on the target. And it's not to my own horn, but it's simply reading things before they happen in a way, because this is a common occurrence, unfortunately. Um, that's why I'm even more skeptical of October the 7th, because knowing the history of that region, it just seems very convenient that something like this happened within the geopolitical landscape that we're in. And we just had Ukraine, Russia. And it's almost like they redirected that whole dialogue to Israel, Palestine. And I don't think that that's just coincidental either. Like I said, it's going to be conspiratorial to a lot of people who maybe haven't been on the forum before. But it's just like at some point, is there a conspiracy theory, or is it just like reading the room and seeing the history patterns?
So I was on Ukraine's side when they were being attacked by Russia. I know that's still ongoing, but there's going to be some reevaluations of who our allies are, because the least likely people, the least likely countries that I never expected North Korea to support Palestine. I never expected Russia to support Palestine. But these dictatorship countries that we're told are dictators are coming out in support of people facing genocide. Meanwhile, Ukraine and the United States is supporting Israel. And that's eye-opening.
It's interesting that you said that, because geopolitics is a complex issue. Um, not only does one have to like understand the geographical forces at hand, which honestly, should Putin have invaded Ukraine? No. That's what I'm saying for people who ask me the question. Is Russia as demonic as people describe it as? I don't think so at all, because I separate government from the people. The way the media presents it is a pretense to basically anytime it's dissent. It's basically condemning dissent, because if you say that you're pro this or pro that, you're automatically going to be put in a box. I'm not pro Russia anything. I'm not pro Ukraine. I'm simply saying that the invasion of Ukraine wasn't out of thin air. That's the point I've always been making. The Ukrainians have had internal conflict themselves for so many years. Russia has a lot of internal conflict. There are territories in Ukraine that are Russian majority. So it's not like it was just automatically Russia was trying to take over Ukraine. The issue is really four particular provinces within Ukraine. And this has been an ongoing conflict the way the Palestine Israel. It's a land thing. It's a national thing, nationalistic ties, ties to the land, ties to a culture, ties between different areas. Um, but the way the media presented it, because we're not bought out by the Russian lobby, but we are bought out by the Israeli lobby. So the way the media spins it is that Russia has to be absolutely terrible. There's no justification for Russia invading, but Israel is totally fine for Israel to drop bombs constantly on the Palestinian people, but Russia has no justification to drop or defend itself against Ukraine. I saw it more through that lens. And it's not that Russia was right for invading, but NATO has been enticing Russia all this time, because Putin clearly said, if you move an inch closer to us, we're going to attack you back. And so what did they do? They let Sweden join NATO. They let another country join NATO. So you're provoking the situation. These other countries aren't trying to make it easier. They're making it more complicated. And I'm not saying that Russia's completely in the innocent. Of course, Russia's not innocent, but Russia is also not the guilty party only. NATO members are also guilty because they allowed this to escalate, and neither side de-escalated the situation. That's what I'm saying. And so it's not just all Russia bad. It's also, when are we going to start taking accountability for adding flames to these situations? And we do this all the time. We being the West. It's not just the East versus the West. The East and the West, this whole divide is still a constant thing. And to me, Russia, at this point, Russia has to be viewed as the East. Russia's not a European country. And I know this sounds weird to say that to people, but it is what it is. Geopolitically, Russia is part of Asia at this point. And it's clear that we've drawn a line in the sand, and it seems like it's just a Cold War that never ended. That's the way the US media is doing it, based on people's reactions. And we're always going to be at war with Russia and China, it seems like.
And it's almost like they're pushing people to look at other countries so that we don't look at what's going on here. And that's an issue. We need to be aware of what's going on in our own soil. We need to be aware of what's going on with our own troops are complicit in war crimes. Why do you think so many people hate us? Our troops have tortured people. Our troops have murdered innocents. My son's father, before he passed away, told me some horrible stories about when he was deployed. We're not innocent by any means. The American government is not innocent. And that's, with the fact that everything feels like it's coming to a head in America right now, with the historic markers being met, with the patterns, and we don't have the unity as the poverty level people, as the people against the government. We don't have the unity and cohesion. We have wolves in sheep's clothing coming in and turning us against each other. We have the media turning us against each other, being bought out by the two corporations. We have the media suppressing candidates like myself. And even though I don't support Jasmine's campaign, they're still being suppressed too. We're all facing these issues outside of the political back and forth that we do. And it shouldn't be like that. Jasmine, myself, not Vivek, but we should have equal footing as Trump or Biden. The people deserve to hear our messages just as much as they deserve to hear Trump's and Biden's. And they get to choose which candidate they feel represents them. But they can't do that if we're being suppressed.
Absolutely. And I wanted to get a few of your positions before we go. You talk about immigration quite a bit on your site, and you also discuss the Second Amendment some, but especially immigration. How should people approach immigration? Is there a limit to your immigration policy? What's your stance on immigration in general? You would give people like a right to citizenship automatically? Like, how do you view immigration in general?
So my family is Mexican. I've seen immigration from every standpoint. I speak from personal experience of what I have witnessed. We need to make the asylum seeking process more streamlined. We need to make the refugee process more streamlined. People don't realize that an asylum seeker, all they have to do is set one foot on American soil, and they have 1 year to apply for asylum. So you can't look at someone and say, oh, you're illegal. You can't tell if somebody is an illegal immigrant or not. And, it's the development of our countries today that created hard borders like that, because we used to be able to travel freely, open market, travel, trade, sell. And it's not like that anymore because of national security. But by streamlining the immigration process, including work and travel visas, making sure families stay together, because right now they're separating families at the southern border. And then pictures of all these single men are coming out when really those men have been separated from their families, from the children that came with them, from their wives, from their aunts, from their grandmas. They typically travel in family units, or they send like a family member with a family member. And the last time we worked with Mexico in that regard, the economy on the border on both sides improved. The infrastructure on both sides of the border improved. It became safer, because when it boils down to it, these people don't want to leave their families. They don't want to leave their homes, but it's currently not safe, or the economy's not there, especially with COVID. The outlying towns and villages that they got hit hard and they had to leave. So if Mexico is actually had an ally, like we should have been, and working together to build that infrastructure, to build that economy, which would benefit both of us, then people would be able to stay in their homes with their families. And we both would benefit.
Yes, the whole idea of immigration seems very politically charged and targeted because it seems like it only comes up when we're talking about one side of the border, and that being the southern border. And I personally, and like my dad was saying when he came onto the show, he was saying, who do you think is allowing the cartels to strengthen, and how do you think the drugs are able to get into the country in the first place? The government's allowing that to happen.
Did
But
you know
somehow,
that
what's that?
the top supplier of fentanyl in the United States is China? Drugs are coming in from legal ports of entry more than they are through illegal ports of entry. Airplanes, boats, like people don't realize that. They just want to blame illegal immigrants. And that's not where the majority of it is coming from.
And so, yeah, but even that point you just made there, so it makes you wonder, is coming in through legal ports. So what does that tell you? What does that tell people when it's coming in anyway? That means that it's designed to come in. It's not just magically showing up. I mean, obviously it's an industry. We always tout the industries. We always tout these companies and corporations. Okay, so why come the drug corporation? Don't you think that that's going to be a corporation?
Exactly. And then not only that, but they also talk about everyone coming to America illegally. But nobody wants to talk about the illegal American immigrants in other countries taking advantage of the school system, the healthcare system that's provided, but still collecting Social Security or disability without being in our country, contributing to our economy. Those are holes in the boat that should be plugged, in my opinion. Like, we can't talk about illegal immigrants coming here while turning the cheek to illegal American immigrants and other immigrants in other countries. And then the influx of, there's a lot of Canadian immigrants that come down in Arizona, and down here they're called snow bunnies. Like, there's actually a term for them. They get dual citizenship, they vote in our elections, and then they go back to Canada. So why are they voting in our elections when they don't live here full time, when they're not being affected by our system in that way? But nobody wants to talk about it because it boils down to racism and the class system. It's been like that since the founding of this country. And that's an issue that we need to fix. I'm not sure of the solution to that outside of working on getting rid of the systematic racism and oppression that we have within our institutions and within the dialogue and the rhetoric, like on Fox News and people like Trump or Vivek who are spreading that hate. That's where we hold space for the Indigenous community, for the Black community, for the Mexican community. I can't speak for them. We have to hold space to hear their voices, to make sure that those solutions are met in a way that they actually want them met, and not in the way that we deem fit or the American government deems appropriate.
I think that's a slippery slope, because you made an implication and you mentioned Trump, Vivek, you mentioned some other. It seems like the racism, like you made a comment there, and it kind of goes over into speech some. But I guess the question would be, what's racist to someone else isn't racist to this person? When you talk about speech, it's like, I guess my question when it comes to speech, how do you determine if something's hateful versus not hateful? If you're having a conversation,
if the Black community is sitting there and saying, what you're saying is racist, I'm offended, then you listen to that community and say, that's racist, they're offended, how can I fix my actions? It's that simple. Listen to the community.
It's legal speech, though. It's legally protected speech, isn't it?
Freedom of speech is not freedom from consequences of your speech. There's a difference. And it's not that hard if somebody says, hey, I'm offended by what you just said. that actually offends me. It hurts my feelings. It negatively affects my community. Can you please not say that? And here's why. A lot of times, if you actually listen and don't react defensively, information is provided to you to educate you on why what you're saying is offensive or what you're doing is offensive. And it's the people who are willing to open and learn that actually become allies of the community. But you have to be willing to listen and not get offended and be like, oh, I wasn't being offensive to you, when they're talking about a community that's not their own.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a slippery slope because the people that I'm surrounded with are, I'd say that it's a mixed bag, but it's more so people who are liberal minded. But for my particular, and I use this word positionality, we use it a lot in the program when I was in the PhD program, but it's really that person's individual navigation within the world. I guess if you had a comparison, the way I explained it to people, if you think about W.E.B. Du Bois's double consciousness, he made the point in The Souls of Black Folk, as a Black person then in the early 1900s, his view of the world as a Black person would be different than a Black person, even a poor Black person. You have different levels within the positionality. So you have a poor Black within that context of the early 1900s versus a Black that was more well established, but you're within this racially dominated white world within the context of 1903. So you have different visions within the experience. Even within Black people, you have different divisions going on. And so I guess that would be my warning, would be, what's racism to one person may not be racism to another person within the Black community. Even now, I guess my issue would be, how do you define the Black community? And I think that's a danger of representation in some ways. And we're going to talk about this weekend. I actually got invited onto a show to discuss the Congressional Black Caucus and its ineffectiveness, its effectiveness at points, but it's also its ineffectiveness. Because you mean to tell me you have a group of people representing all Black people? What, 40 people can represent a whole group of people? I think at some point it's like it becomes dangerous because, sure, they may be representative of some Blacks, but they're not going to be representative of an entire group of people. And how do you define the Black community or Black communities? That's the only issue when it comes to identities and when it gets thrown in with like speech and politics. I guess it's like, which Black community are you talking to? This conservative group of Blacks over here, or these liberal Blacks over? I mean, it's really complicated to people.
For me, it wouldn't be about the speech itself. I obviously can't speak on the Black community or for the Black community. I don't have that experience. I haven't lived as in America as a Black person, so I can't speak on that. I can hold space for people and listen and learn. But when it comes to fighting the systematic racism, is when a cop shoots a Black person because they're Black. That right there is a very clear violation. You know what I mean? If you're the incarceration rates for Black people, Mexicans, and Indigenous people, that's obviously based on race. They're targeted way more than white people are. So while within the Indigenous community, there's issues within the Black community, there's issues within the Mexican community, there's issues when those communities face off against the white community, it seems like a pretty clear line physically where that racism comes in with the actions of our cops, our medical professionals, our teachers. There's a lot of racist rhetoric in there that we can address and acknowledge, like saying that Black women don't feel the same amount of pain as white women. That's racist, and it negatively affects Black women. Saying that, calling Black people thugs, or assuming that all gang members are Black or Mexican. And that those stereotypes are harmful and prevent our communities from getting help. And we need to address that within our institutions, because the prison system was created as it is today, specifically at the end of slavery, because they still needed slave labor. Those types of things is what I'm talking about. Now, if somebody gets mad at somebody else for saying something, that's their deal. Like I said, I can't speak for the Black community. But if a Black person came to me and said, hey, what you said was really offensive right now, even if it's not offended to another Black person, I would correct my actions for the person that came to me. That's just respect, in my opinion.
And there's a lot of and I definitely get your point about the rhetoric, which I think the Trump has been very effective with rhetoric to connect his base. But everyone does this. Each political party uses rhetoric to connect to their constituents. And I think Trump, what you're getting at, I saw it really the example when he was going to go to Tulsa, but he decided not to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and give the speech, knowing that there was a massacre, the Black Wall Street massacre in Tulsa. And so he would conveniently just go to Tulsa, Oklahoma during that same period, the same appearance he made when he was in front of Mount Rushmore, the Lakota Nation. And he knows that he's grandstanding, giving the speech in front of Mount Rushmore, knowing that you're going to piss off the Lakota Nation. These types of actions are definitely calculated. And a lot will argue that there are racist stances. But they're also politically charged decisions. And so it's unfortunate that racism is used even within the political discourse and the election cycles and run for office. People will use that as a way to get support. And Trump is no exception to this. I would argue, at the other hand, to be fair, I think Trump people also make a good point that you could argue that Joe Biden has done more damage to the Black community based on police policies. So to me, the racism is like you got to pick your poison. Which racism are you talking about? Are you talking about the Joe Biden 1994 crime bill that increased 100,000 cops, the mandatory minimums, the disproportionate effect of Black people? Are we talking about that racism, or are we talking about the rhetoric racism? To me, it's like that's the way I kind of see it. And when I talk to people, they're like, well, damn, it's like you're really picking your poison. This guy is spewing this, but then this guy's actually writing this in the law. It's like you really don't get any sort of an advantage. I mean, and Trump with the law and order talk, during the George Floyd protest. We know what law and order means when you say stuff like that. Like he's adding fuel to the fire. Like he's absolutely doing that. But it's very dangerous when the racism is definitely a dangerous thing, but we're also adding it in a political discourse that's already racially charged.
And that's when you decide not to pick your poison, but to look at third-party candidates and unaffiliated candidates. You don't have to pick one or the other. There's more options. There's more options out there.
That's funny. Yeah, and that's the way, and I know neither group likes to hear that when I talk to a lot of the Biden people. I know a lot of the Trump people. But I'm just like, I'll be honest with you, I have no horse in the race as a person who identifies as an independent, because I'm just telling you from my vantage standpoint, you basically making me choose like which one is better or worse. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, why do I want to choose? Like, do you want to inject it in your arm or in your leg? It's just, to me, it's just too much. I mean, I've just decided that I don't want to play the political game. If you don't see that your rhetoric is harming people, then you're choosing not to see it. And on the other side, if you're going to acknowledge that this person has written policies in as a senator, they actually orchestrated the legislation themselves, and you're going to tell me that they did that innocently? I just, it's hard for me to sell either side, like either point. I can be sold either way.
Yeah.
And I think you understand that too. Even when, because you say yourself running in 2016, you had kind of like a coming moment to where like, okay, I have to do something, like this shook my world up. I have to do something about this. I have to be more politically active. And I think we all have those moments where it's like, okay, I've seen enough. Um, I have to do something about this. That's why I got off the Obama train, like full disclosure. When I knew that Obama was not going to end Guantanamo, I was like, okay, it's clear that he has no interest in closing down Guantanamo Bay. That was kind of my moment to where, and then I looked more into it, I was like, oh, he's not trying to end the wars, he's adding to the wars. And so you kind of have to have these moments to yourself. And I urge every person who's out there supporting people local, state, federal level to look into these candidates a lot more. And if they're going against your principles, then maybe it's time to reassess the situation some.
I agree. Introspection and looking at yourself that way is really hard to do. But at a time like we're facing now, I think everybody needs to. I still have more learning and growing to do. That's never going to stop. I'm constantly hearing new experiences from other people, what their lives were like, what they lived through, and learning those new perspectives have absolutely helped me in this campaign. People bring new things to me all the time that I should look into. And it's in constantly learning. And I encourage everyone else to do that as well. And part of my platform is also education on how the election actually works, like the Electoral College. It's not rigged. It's the rhetoric that's rigged. It's the media that's rigged. And a lot of people don't know how our system actually works. And I didn't realize how many people didn't know until I was running for office.
The interesting part before we go today, and I will have another presidential forum, but I will probably be accused of, well, Kiko, if someone's attached to a political party, that's going to be a disadvantage to them if they're not running anymore, but an unaffiliated and independent candidate can technically run all the way to the final day. That is interesting. That there are platforms to where you can technically campaign all the way to the end, but if you're attached to another minor party like the Green Party, who's already selected their candidate, those people who are running under the Green Party, I think that they're pretty much outright. They can't just all of a sudden become an independent candidate.
I don't honestly know. I think you can, if they already have ballot access and they switch to independent, they have to restart the process in every state.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So switching would be detrimental. I know like Marianne Williamson is Democrat. She's not dropping out. Jasmine is Green Party. They're not dropping out. So Vivek Haley dropped out. Vivek has not dropped out. He's Republican. He's not dropping out.
Vivek dropped out.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah, Vivek endorsed Trump and Haley's still in.
Oh, I thought Haley dropped out the day after Trump won a certain primary.
Now
I'll have to go look again.
And people have reasons. That's why people are questioning the motives of, like why she's still in it, even though. But like I said, I have nothing to do with that. With the Haley campaign.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. All I was gonna say is, no, she's still in it. Vivek dropped out. I think after the second or third contest, and he basically endorsed Trump that night.
Okay.
And Haley's still been in it.
Okay, I missed that part. What was I gonna say? I don't remember.
It makes you wonder with everything going on because we're in a unique time, politically, and there's a lot of different storylines even within that. I mean, you have prominent people running. Dr. Shiva's running as an independent. He's pretty prominent. He was married to Fran Drescher, who was the nanny. I don't know if people knew that or not. He's been kind of, I guess, blackballed and away from the media. He's gone on the record of calling pretty ugly names to people in the field, specifically Robert Kennedy Jr. It's clear that he's not a fan of Robert Kennedy Jr. But then you also had the fact that he's Indian. Nikki Haley's Indian American. Vivek Ramaswamy's Indian American. You have a lot of different cultural parallels going on. ideological stuff going on. Just we're in an interesting time in the country, in the political landscape, on all levels. Honestly, I'm going to be bringing on Christina Amir Khalil on. She's a Senate candidate running out of the state of New Jersey as a Green. So I'm not just trying to get president level people, but also Senate level and some of the local offices. But it's really hard to find third party independent people running at the local level, especially in a state like Tennessee. It's very hard. I can't even name anyone right now. I've been to Ballotpedia, tried to find people, and it's a really hard process right now. It's easier for governor races to find people like that, but it's a lot harder to find people running, especially at this juncture in time. But I want to give you a final few minutes to address anything that you want to address to my audience. There's still a lot that I want to ask of you, but unfortunately, there are some time constraints right now because I had to prepare for a few more interviews. But I just want to say thank you for coming out to the show. And if you had any final words for my audience.
Well, I highly encourage everyone to really research candidates. Even myself, fact check me, research me. I'm not telling people that they have to vote for me, but I would advocate that you vote against the two-party system, because if nobody votes for them, then they can't win. If that's me, if it's anybody else that does win, fantastic. A lot of us are grassroots campaign. So instead of donating to the really rich politicians, find the ones who resonate with you that are grassroots and help them out. My donate link is in my link tree. It's on my YouTube, my TikTok, my Facebook. It's really easy. You can subscribe to my website for $1 a month. And if I have over 200,000 followers across all social media platforms, that would help me get on all the ballots if all my supporters subscribe to my website easily without millions of dollars. So, we don't need millions to run. We just need your support, the people's support. And we have the numbers, we have the votes. The parties are fractured. Now is the time for us to make change.
And that donation, is that on your website, your official website?
Yes, it should be on the very front page. You should be able to just hit donate. For the subscription, you have to go to the shop tab, and it's like in the store section.
Okay. So yes, I'm gonna try to publish an episode tonight. Got a lot of editing to do with just different stuff going on right now, but I'm gonna get it published as soon as possible. Hopefully, we can air your episode tonight. If not, it's going to be aired tomorrow for sure. And I'll send you all the information so you can share with your audience. Um, Episode 104 has been very interesting, exciting, conversational. We learned a lot about Brittany Jones' administration prospects and just like policies. We also learned a lot about other stuff too that I didn't know about, the land back and forth with the Sherman and Jones campaign. I didn't know anything about. Um, I know that previously on episode 26, I know for sure that we talked about indigenous rights and we talked about that. But like you said, it wasn't under the land bank name per se. And it's interesting now, March 14, 2024, and I've heard land back so much within the last month, even now. And not just from your campaign and Jasmine's campaign, but other campaigns too. So what that tells me is that people are picking up on that as an opportunity. I think that this even not came up during the free and equal elections debate, this whole talk of land back, which I thought was like, it's kind of like when did this become like all of a sudden a priority? I'm glad that it is a priority, but it just makes you wonder like when did these things become popular? And you're the genesis of that. You really were the first person that I knew of that talked about anything indigenous related running for office, and I had looked at a lot of people's websites and I hadn't seen anyone with a platform but yours. And so, like I said, I'm not going to speak for Jasmine's campaign. Um, I hope I don't get criticism for making that comment, but I'm just saying I reached out to you first And you had a policy on there, and Jasmine had a policy too. I'm not. That's all I say about it. But I'm learning new information today, and I'm glad that I learned this new information today. And I'm willing to have anyone back on that wants to come back on to discuss, any issues that they have with the information talked about today. I do want to have another presidential forum, and if Brittany will be willing to come on to that presidential forum, you have an open invitation from Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum to be a part of that. I think it'd be a great opportunity for visibility. And I just want to say thanks again for this episode 104. And I know the beautiful people there will appreciate the interview. You do have some fans in the audience. I know that for a fact. I've gotten the messages. So there's definitely support out there for third party candidates. Um, I won't call it non traditional, unaffiliated candidates, independent candidates, third party candidates. Consider giving these people your support. I haven't endorsed anyone in particular. People keep asking me that question. I don't know why. I'm like, I know other platforms that's totally fine. I can't tell them how to run their business and run their YouTube channel or anything else. Here, I don't think we're going to make an official endorsement. We just like the people that we bring on. We'll say that much. But I'm not going to officially endorse one candidate over the other because to me, that makes it seem like, okay, Kiko already has his favorite, which I don't. I honestly can say that I like a lot of good things in each platform that I've seen. There are things that I don't like in each of the platforms. So I'll say that I haven't reached a conclusion yet. And that's been 100% honest with my audience. And maybe after the election cycle is over, I may make an announcement, but I just don't think it's right. I'm all about growing from the outside. I want to grow these people and their platforms or whatever. And I like a lot of the candidates that I've interviewed. So I'll leave it at that. And enjoy your day, beautiful people. And we will talk soon. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for having me on.